Betrayed. Broken, reborn. This is Novel Binge.
On the day of the CloudGate system launch, the seat at my master control station was taken by Suman's ex-lover. He used my interface, presented my proposal, and even publicly demanded that I hand over the backup keys. Suman stood behind him, her face cold as she said to me, "Chen-yan, don't embarrass me embarrassed today." They all thought I was just an operations engineer who had no value after getting kicked off the project. It wasn't until the city's emergency response links began to spiral out of control that they realized some seats aren't just anyone can sit in and truly hold steady. When I entered the main control center, my seat was already taken. That chair was right in the center, straight ahead, 3 linked screens, connected screens. The left one is linked to traffic signals, the right one to the hospital emergency dispatch, and the middle screen displays the main control interface of the CloudGate cloud system. I've been sitting here for 3 years. There's still a label I stuck on the back of the chair. Night Patrol, don't turn off the screen. Now, Han Yue is sitting there. He was wearing a dark gray suit caught the light, the watch on his wrist glinting harshly under the cold screen. As he operated my console while smiling at the media and investors behind him. Yes, the old interface does look a bit outdated. Han Yue tapped the screen with his finger. ADST. But I get it's understandable. The person who used to be in charge of the main control like these dense rows of buttons, working the night shift. They rely on piling up features to feel safe. Someone nearby laughed. I swiped my work badge. The access door didn't budge. A line of text popped up on the screen. Permission level adjusted. Observer seat. I stared at the line of text, my hand frozen over the card reader. QNL walked out from behind the crowd. She is Suman's assistant. Every time she came to find me in the server room over the past 3 years, she always wore an expression of disgust at the stale air in here. Today, it was even more obvious. She stood in front of me, her voice neither loud nor low, just enough for a few people nearby to hear. "Chen-yan, perfect timing that you're here." She raised her hand and pointed toward the last T-row. "Mr. Su has arranged for you to sit in the backup seat today. There will be a lot of people at the press conference, so don't disturb Consultant Han Advisor's presentation." The backup seat. I looked at the main console. Han Yue lifted his eyes to meet mine. He leaned back in his chair with a smile. "Director Chen, apologies, but I'll be taking over the main control today." He called me director. The tone was as if to remind everyone that I was just a director. After all, today isn't just an internal test, it is the most important launch conference before Lansing's IPO. The technical lead needs someone who can explain things clearly. A few of the young engineers behind him exchanged glances. No one spoke, but the expressions on their expressions said it all. They all knew where I used to sit, and they all understood why that seat was taken by a different person today. I ignored them. My gaze fell on the lower right corner of the main screen. A pale yellow alert was flashing there. Urban emergency link. Interface response delay. 0.7 seconds. Not serious. But before the press conference begins, the sandbox demo shouldn't touch the city's emergency response chain. I take 2 steps closer. "Don't touch that chain." Han Yue raised an eyebrow. "Daoe, which one?" I pointed at the bottom right corner. Urban emergency link. Sandbox for demonstration purposes. Do not connect to the live network interface. Han Yue let out a laugh. "Chen-yan, are you maybe a little too tense?" He turned to look at the media. "Everyone, take a look. This is a lingering issue from the old system. Many early-stage technicians tend to treat an ordinary interface as if it were a bomb." Someone laughed along. I said, "That is not an ordinary interface." "I know." He cut me off. "ADD, transportation, healthcare, energy, public safety, energy, governance, CloudGate. It is not like I haven't read the documentation." He looked at me, his gaze laced with deliberate condescension. "Nenshin, I've worked on city-level projects abroad far more complex than this. You don't need to lecture me on overnight shift experience." Suman stood behind him, watching. A black suit skirt, her hair neatly pinned up. He was wearing a silver badge of Lansing Technology on his chest. She used to dislike wearing this kind of clothing. 3 years ago, when Lansing was on the verge of bankruptcy, she sat by the server gulping cold rice dressed in a faded hoodie. Back then she said, "Chen-yan, once Lansing survives, I'll make sure you sit in the very center." Now, she glanced at me. There was no explanation in her eyes, only impatience. "Chen-yan," she spoke, "the media and investors are all here today. Don't make a scene." I looked at her. "I'm just pointing out the risks. Han Yue just took over and needs time to adapt to the old system." Her tone turned cold. "If you have objections, you can bring them up after the meeting. Now, go to the spare seat." The control center fell silent for a second. Then, the low murmurs resumed, as if it were just a minor incident. My access privileges had been downgraded. My spot has been taken. The risks I pointed out were dismissed as nothing more than a petty jealousy. Chin Lu handed me a temporary badge. It read, "Observers." I didn't answer. One-time pickup. She frowned. "Chen Yen Dan T, make it hard for CEO Su." I looked at Su Man. She didn't say nothing. She had tacitly agreed. I put my badge into my pocket, walked to the last row, and sat down. The screen on the spare bench was small. The chair was hard, too, just like the folding chair I sat in 3 years ago when the company first rented its first office. Only back then. Su Man was sitting beside me. Now, she stood behind Han Yue. 10 minutes before the press conference began, Han Yue suddenly turned his head. "Chen Yen." I looked up. He reached out his hand to me. "The backup key is with you, isn't it?" Several people in the main control center employees all looked over. Chin Lu's face tensed up as well. I asked, "What do you need it for?" Han Yue smiled. "I'm the technical lead today. If there is an issue during the presentation that requires switching permission, I can't exactly go running to the back row to find you." I said, "The backup key can't be handed over to someone, not have someone who has been recorded." The smile on his face faded slightly. "Fadi, another filing again." He turned to an investor representative nearby and spread his hands. "See, the biggest problem with the old system isn't the code, it is the people, processes, filings, permissions. They can stall anything new." The man smiled too. "That is why we need a new team." Han Yue nodded. "Exactly." He looked at me again. Chen Yan, Imer nodded. I didn't move. "Not. This thing isn't mine, nor yours. It can only be used within the chain of responsibility." Han Yue Han's eyes turned slightly colder. "Did you do that on purpose?" I said, "It is the procedure." "Or then is it because you're not happy with me being seated here?" As soon as those words were spoken, the atmosphere in the main control room, the atmosphere instantly shifted. Several pairs of eyes fell on me and Su Man and me. They all knew who Han Yue was. Su Man's old flame. After studying abroad and returning with several impressive project credentials under my belt, as soon as I entered Langsing, I was appointed as the chief architectural consultant for the Cloud Gate system. 3 days ago, the internal company notice still stated that issued an announcement. Notice still stated that I was the technical lead for the product manager for the press confer. NCE. Today I'm just a spectator. No one thinks this is just a procedural adjustment. Su Man finally walked over. "Chen Yan, step outside." The corridor was quieter than the main control center. Beyond the glass door, Han Yue sat in my seat, chatting with Lu Heng. My seat head down. Lu Heng is a partner at Mingxuan Capital. Whether Langsing can push toward its IPO depends heavily on the money in his hands. Su Man crossed her arms, lowering her voice. "Today is very important to me." I said, "So you let someone who isn't on record touch the backup key?" She frowned. Han Yue isn't an outsider." I looked at her. She seemed to realize that those words were inappropriate. Paused for a moment before adding, "I mean, he is now a consultant hired by Langsing. Advisors cannot be part of the safety responsibility chain. After filing, it is possible. The press conference is in 10 minutes. Minutes." She paused for a second, silenced by my bluntness. Soon, her expression turned even colder. "Chen Yan, do you have to be like this?" I asked. "Which one?" "Turning work issues into personal grievances." I looked at her. "Do you think I'm jealous?" She didn't answer immediately. That one new line, that single space was clearer than any response. I suddenly found it a little amusing. 3 years ago, when the first version of CloudGate kept us working until 4 in the morning, she fell asleep slumped over the server room desk. The system alarm went off, just as I was taking off the jacket I had draped over her. Her first words upon waking was, "Chen Yan, don't worry about me. Save the system first." Back then, she knew the system mattered more than emotions. Now, she thinks I'm just acting out of emotion. "Chen Yan." Su Man's tone softened slightly. "After the press conference, I'll give you an explanation. A promotion, a raise, or any compensation you'd like. We can discuss it all." I asked, "My position, can that also be compensated?" A flash of irritation crossed her eyes. "It is just a seat." I looked at her. The white light of the hallway gleamed. It illuminated her face, bore no trace of the past. "For you, it is just a seat." She went silent. She fell silent, remained silent. I pressed on. "For you, am I the same?" Su Man's face changed color. "Chen Yan, you weren't like this before." She has been saying that a lot lately. Every time I refuse to cooperate, every time I warn of the risks, every time I decline to make way for her dignity, she would say, "You weren't like this before." I nodded. "Yes, before. I used to think she knew why I let her." Su Man, seeing me relent, thought the whole matter had blown over. She lowered her voice even further. "Don't embarrass Han Yue again today." I looked at her. He is the one who is embarrassed. She avoided my gaze. "The company needs someone who can stand at the forefront." I didn't ask any further. Asking too much would seem like I'm begging. I didn't want to beg. The press conference officially began. Percent Langsep, class percent ZHHS, understand E200 2503% LIC, SEP B class percent begin. The lobby had been transformed into a palette of blue and white. The screen displayed Linjiang Smart City Cloud Lock System Final Press Conference. The lights were very bright. There are many camera angles. Han Yue stood on the stage, laser pointer in hand, with the first structural diagram behind him that I had drawn 3 years ago. The lines had been beautified again. The color changed. The signature in the bottom left corner also changed. It used to be Chen Yan Chen's signature. Now, it is Yue Han's. He said. Bungie said, the Cloud Gate system is not just an ordinary and urban maneg platform, but rather a city-level intelligent hub that can integrate transportation, healthcare, energy, finance, and government affairs. This sentence is also familiar. I wrote it in the first version of the white paper. Just my original words were shorter. What I wrote. CloudGate is not a display system. It's a safety system. Han Yue deleted the second half because it doesn't sound good. It is hard to tell a compelling story. He continued. Over the past 3 years, the Langsing team has been exploring how to mock e-cities self-regulate, like a living organism. Today we will showcase the world's leading dynamic city scheduling model. Applause rose from the audience. Su Man sat in the front row, a perfectly measured smile on her face. Lu Heng sat beside her, nodding slightly. Qin Lu walked to the last row, holding the list to the last row. With the last row, she showed me the group photo list of the technical team. Chen Yan, this is the final version. Please confirm. I glanced at it. No mention of my name. I looked up at her. She seemed to have her lines ready in advance. CEO Su said that today, the new team will take the lead. You're not good at public speaking, so it wouldn't be appropriate to put you on stage. I said nothing. She put the list away and added, don't overthink it. It hasn't been easy for the company to get where it is today. Whoever can help CEO Su make a name for herself is the one who should be at the forefront. Up front, Han Yue was just speaking about safety redundancy. A lot of people think safety means being conservative, but it's not. He smiled as he smiled, looking out at the audience. True security lies in maintaining stability amidst rapid change. In the past, systems relied too heavily on manual inspections. But after stepping in, I carried out extensive automation optimizations. Cheng Xiang was live streaming nearby. He was an invited tech blogger. The camera first captured Han Yue, then suddenly turned to me. Hey, Rose, see that guy in the corner? His voice wasn't loud, but those in the surrounding rows could all hear it. I heard he used to be in charge of CloudGate's main C. Entrol, looks like Langsing is starting to change its lineup. Tech guys, who can't tell a good story really do get phased out easily. Someone nearby chuckled quietly. I looked down at the backup screen. Observation permissions. Can't modify the parameters. Cannot connect to the main control. Can only view log latency. The response latency of the city emergency chain is still rising. 0.7 seconds. 0.9 seconds. 1.1 seconds. Han Yue switched to the traffic simulation module. The large screen displayed Linjiangcheng Morning Rush Hour Road Network. Next, we'll demonstrate how the Cloud Gate system handles congestion and emergency priority tasks. He tapped his finger down. The road flow lines began to shift. At first, everything proceeded normally. On the 7th second, the East 3rd Ring Road simulation node experienced a lag. At the 9th second, the hospital emergency priority lane was mistakenly merged into regular traffic. At the 10th second, a line of yellow text flashed in yellow at the bottom right corner of the screen. Priority conflict. Han Yue didn't see it. Or rather, he saw it but didn't seem serious. He kept on talking. As everyone can see, the system is dynamically calculating. Optimal route. My finger landed on the backup terminal. The observation booth had no primary control access, but the early maintenance port was still there. That wasn't meant for showing off. It was the final human checkpoint when the system became unstable. I typed in a short command. Only lock the conflict. Don't take over, run the demo. The big screen paused for half a second. The yellow text vanished. The road network was restored. Han Yue finally noticed something was wrong, and his face briefly changed color, shifted. But he reacted quickly. He turned to the audience, his smile natural. What you just saw is a redundant switching scenario we deliberately retained, he said. Data say. After detecting localized congestion, the system automatically repairs the path allocation. Applause broke out, even more fervent than before. Cheng said to the live stream audience. That is some impressive crowd control. Consultant Han really knows her stuff. I released the keyboard. Su Man turned back and glanced at me. She saw it. I know she saw, but she quickly turned back. No explanation. Not a single word. As if that line of commands just now was also part of Han Yue's demonstration as well. After the press conference ended, Han Yue was surrounded by the media. Someone asked him about his career plans after returning to China. He said, Langsing is a platform I have high hopes for. President Su has both ambition and execution ability to execute. I hope to help her bring CloudGate to a larger market. When he said this, he glanced at Su Man. Su Man smiled. That kind of smile I hadn't seen her give me in a long time. I stood up, ready to leave. Qin Lu stopped me. She had a document in her hand. Chen Yan, This is a notice from the company for you. I took it. Notice of suspension. An investigation. The reason was written, was very thorough. During the press conference, I connected to the system without approval, interfering with the official demonstration, which constitutes a major procedural violation. During the suspension period, all accounts, badges, terminals, and server room keys are to be temporarily reclaimed. I finished reading and looked up. Did Su-man sign this? Chin-Lu avoided my gaze. Fool. This was a company decision. Han Yue walked over with a cup of coffee. Chen Yan, don't blame Su-man. His tone was gentle. Today was such an important occasion. You accessing the system with OT authorization. Accessing the system was indeed inappropriate. A tech person needs to know their boundaries. I asked him, why did the traffic module just conflict? His movement paused. What conflict? The emergency chain priority has been altered by you. Han Yue smiled. Chen Yan, you need evidence to back up what you say. There it is, a log. Then go and get the log. He handed his coffee cup to hand the coffee cup to the person adjacent to him, spreading his hands. However, since you've been suspended now, you probably won't be able to get it. Chin-Lu immediately chimed in. Please return your badge. My phone buzzed. A message from Su-man. Take a few days to cool off. Stop making a scene. I stared at those words. A scene? I saved her launch event. She says, I'm causing a scene. I took off my badge and placed it on the tray in Chin-Lu's hand. Chin-Lu breathed a sigh of relief. Han Yue looked at the badge and smiled even more conspicuously. By the way, Chen Yan, he called out to me. There's no need for you to handle the night shift duty roster anymore. Since the new team is taking over, we can't just follow the old habits. I nodded. Okay. He waited for me to lose my temper. Su-man was probably waiting too. Perhaps waiting. I didn't. I just turned and left the Langsing lobby. Outside, it was already dark. The elevated highways of Linjiang City, Linjiang gleamed with a slender white glow of white light at night. GHT. I stood by the roadside, and my phone buzzed again. It was Su-man again. Let's talk once the press conference buzz dies down. I stared at it for a few seconds, then turned off my phone. Some things, even after the hype dies down, remain unspeakable. A whiteboard was leaning against the door of the rental apartment. It was very old. One corner was chipped off. There were dried water stains on the back. I recognized it at a glance. That was the project whiteboard from Langsing's very first office 3 years ago. We couldn't afford a new one back then. Su-man dragged it back from the whole way from the second hand to hand, from the second hand from hand, from the second hand market, and even scraping her hand on the way. She laughed and said at the time, when we have money someday, I'll buy you a whole wall of electronic screens to write your architecture on. Later, Langsing really got rich. 3 joint screens in the main control center, the center holographic screen at the launch screen. But this whiteboard, though, was discarded by someone at my doorstep. The landlady came up from downstairs. Xiao Chen, someone from your company dropped this off. They said it is old stuff being cleared out and no longer wanted. Old items clearance. I moved the whiteboard into the room. There are still unerasable words above. Main traffic artery, medical priority, energy throttling, disconnection protection. The last line was smudged by a wet cloth, leaving only a few blurred strokes. I stood before the whiteboard for a long time, not moving. 3 years ago, Langsing had only enough cash left for only 2 months of payroll. Su-man visited many investment firms, but no one was willing to invest. When the request to translate large segments of text that contains multiple when the Linjiang Smart City pilot project went to public tender, she came to me with her documents in hand. She said, Chen Yan, I know you have an invitation from the regulatory side, but I really don't want to lose. By that time, Bang Ji had already come to see me. He said, Fei, Engineer Chen, if you come oversee the supervision side, you can save yourself from shouldering the bad debts of private companies. I refused. Not because I'm all that noble. It was just that Su-man was sitting at the door of the server room, her eyes red and swollen. She said, help me this once. When Langsing pulls through, I won't forget it. That sentence, I believed for 3 years. I picked up the damp cloth and wiped the whiteboard clean again. Upon reaching the last line, his movements came to a halt. That was a reminder I wrote to myself back then. When risk spirals out of control, disconnect first, explain later. Su-man thought that remark sounded cold at the time. She said, fighting, but what if the client curses us after the connection is cut? I said, scolding is better than something going wrong. She nodded, slightly. Then from now on, you hold that line, this line. Later, I did. She forgot. I wiped the last line clean. The only sound left in the room was the soft scrape of the whiteboard against the wall. After wiping it clean, I booted up my computer and logged into the private backup system. My company account had already been frozen, but some things weren't stored on the company's servers. First version, architecture's original commit logs, early review comments. Also, the Linjiang Smart City chain of responsibility filing receipt. I didn't download them immediately, just staring at those folders. The cursor hovered over the last option. Personal security, guarantee status. I didn't click. No, I didn't. Not yet. The next morning, Meng Qinghe called me. She was the technical head of the technical lead at the emergency dispatch center of Linjiang Hospital. The moment the call connected, she asked, "Chen Yan, where is the cloud gate platform? Chen Yan, did your cloud gate system get upgraded last night?" I sat up straight in my chair. "What is wrong?" "Ambulance dispatch mismatch." She spoke quickly. "Saidi, Tendal. There was a stroke patient in the south of the city. The system routed the car onto a closed-off service road under construction road. Lucky for us, the driver knew the area well and Chang ed course in time, or it would have delayed us by at least 8 minutes. I gripped the phone in my hand. Outside the window, the sunlight was harsh, but my palms were cold. Day A. Send me the anomaly records. Meng Qinghe was taken aback for a moment. "You're still in charge of this, aren't you?" "I'll take the record first," I said. She quickly sent over a screenshot of the low G. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. The city's emergency response link had been reordered. Medical dispatch changed from level 1 rigid priority to level 2 dynamic priority. Operation source, Langsing Technology main console. Takeover account, HY, Han Yue. I enlarged the screenshot and looked at it twice. Then he sent it to Su Man. Immediately halt Han Yue's underlying modifications. The medical priority has been altered, already impacting emergency dispatch. Half an hour later, Su Man still hadn't replied. Han Yue first called. There was a smile in his voice. "Chen Yan, you've been suspended and you're still keeping an eye on Langsing systems." I said, "You tampered with the medical priority. TIE settings. Optimization. That is not optimization." Han Yue's tone cooled down. "Chen Yan, do you think too highly of yourself? Dynamic city scheduling was always meant to break old priority ties." I said. The ambulance was almost directed into a closed road. He was silent for a second. "Soon," then quickly smiled again. "Just a few data fluctuations. Don't use public safety to scare people." That phrase sounded very familiar. Not long after, Su Man also sent a message. "I know you're not convinced, but don't use public safety to scare me." I stared at that line of text. For a few seconds, I didn't even know what to say back. She knew me too well, so she knew best how to turn my reminders into emotions. I replied to her, "This is the final warning." After sending it, I backed up all the hospital anomaly records, the abnormal records, the screenshot of the permission downgrade on the day of the presscon feed, rents, and the traffic module conflict log. A notification from the old system notification popped up in the bottom right corner of my screen. "Do you want to enter the responsibility? Confirmation system. I'll turn it off." It still wasn't enough. Just an anomaly isn't enough. They'll say it's an old interface. They'll call it a legacy issue. They'll say I kept the permissions were retained by me without authorization. They need to say it themselves. At 3 in the afternoon, Langsing's internal memo was sent to my private mail. I don't know who forwarded it. The title is very long. Internal notice regarding recent anomalous fluctuations in the cloud gate system and the cleanup and cleanu of old interfaces. I clicked it open. It was beautifully written inside. Some fluctuations observed during recent press conference demonstrations and trial operations are expected to be related to the former operations lead Chen Yan retaining old interfaces without authorization and failing to complete the handover according to protocol. The company has suspended his relevant permissions and fully taken over the cloud gate system. Should any liability disputes arise in the future, the company will pursue individual responsibilities in accordance with legal measures. Related individuals. I smiled when I read that. The smile quickly faded. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Chin Lu sent over a file. No sooner had she sent it than it was recalled. She withdrew quickly, but I had already clicked on it. It was a management meeting minutes. The meeting was scheduled for 6:30 in the evening. The attendees included Su Man, Han Yue, Lu Heng, and several other directors. Han Yue said, at the meeting, the remaining old interfaces pose the greatest risk. The fact that Chen Yan still receiving abnormal hospital records after Chen Yan's suspension sugage. STS that he maintained back channels in place. Lu Heng asked, will the final acceptance review pass? Han Yue replied, as long as signs a liability statement for the old interface, admitting that the early maintenance interface was retained by him personally, the issue can be isolated. So response was brief, approved in principle, follow up ASAP. I stared at those 4 words. Approved in principle. They were cleaner than if she had cursed me to my face. Chin Lu sent another message. Sent to the wrong person. I replied. I saw it. Over there. It kept showing typing. After a long while later, she sent just one line. Chen Yan, don't ruin me. I didn't reply. Early the next morning I went to Langsing. Not to make a scene. I haven't retrieved the backup of my personal logs that I left in the server room. The first version of the architecture submission records are stored in there. The front desk at Langsing building had a new person. Seeing me, she was taken aback for a moment, then lowered head and made a phone call. I didn't wait for her to finish and went straight upstairs. At the entrance of the server room, the access control wouldn't let me through. 2 security guards stopped me. Mr. Chen, the company has informed us that you are not allowed to enter the core area now. I'm just getting my personal belongings, I said. The security guard looked troubled. The inner door slid open. Han Yue walked out with several engineers. He was holding an old hard drive in his hand. Looking for this? He tossed the hard drive casually at my feet. Crack. A crack split open in the shell. All your junk is in there, he said. Take this and get out. Don't keep hanging around the server room. It'll make people think Langsing can't survive without you. Someone nearby. Someone chuckled under their breath. Zhou Ming stood at the back of the crowd. He looked at the hard drive, then at me, then opened his mouth as if to speak. In the end, nothing was said. I bent down to pick up the hard drive. The hard drive was very light, but in that moment, I remembered so many nights. Alarm sounds. Cold lunchbox. Su Man was so sleepy, she could barely keep her eyes open. Yet, she still held on to ask me, "Can I pass?" I said, "Can." Later on the question, "Can you?" That, later he always passed. Bindiki now they packed those nights' hard drives and dumped them at my feet. Su Man stepped out of the elevator. She must have heard the noise. When she saw me, her brows immediately furrowed. "Chen Yan, why are you here?" I raised the hard drive, getting my logs back my logs. She glanced at Han Yue, then looked back at me. "Now that you have it, just leave." I asked her, "Is this your intention, yours as well?" She avoided my eyes. The company is at a critical juncture right now. Any misunderstanding will be magnified." Misunderstanding? I looked at her. "Are you telling me that asking me to sign an old interface?" Lie. Ability waiver for the interface was also a misunderstanding. Su Man's expression shifted slightly. Qin Lu stood behind, her face turning pale. Han Yue immediately picked up the convef. Ration. "Chen Yan, no one's asking you to take the fall. We just want you to clarify what you've done." I didn't look at him, only looking at Su Man. "Are you sure you want me to leave?" She was silent for a few seconds. "At least for today. Don't show up in the Cloud Gate project anymore." I nodded. "Good." Han Yue smiled. "Did you hear that?" Before I turned around before leaving, and said to Su Man, "Remember, it was you who made me leave." Her expression finally changed, but I was already inside the elevator. The moment the elevator doors closed, I saw Zhou Ming lower his head down. At that moment, I knew that the last shred of goodwill between us had to be let go. The old hard drive was less damaged than I had imagined. The casing was cracked, but the disk was still alive. I connected it to the backup computer. The machine whirred for over 10 minutes. As directories slowly popped up one by. The earliest folder was named Yunja of Core, Lin Yi, created 3 years ago. Inside are the record of the first version of the system. Chen Yan, Zhou Ming, Chen Yan 4. The name Su Man appeared rarely. The name Han Yue appeared only once. I stared at that line for a few seconds. It was an abandoned dynamic priority module. I wrote it back then to handle multitask allocation under extreme congestion. The simulation results looked beautiful. Traffic efficiency increased by 12%. Energy dispatch response improved by 8% in dispatch response. It looks great on the PPT, but it has a fatal flaw. In extreme scenarios, the system could misclassify rigid priority tasks, like emergency medical services, and fire response as ordinary dynamic resources. That is why I deleted it before the review. The reason for discarding it being scrapped was clearly stated. Not permitted to enter the city's actual city of real world the enter. I continued flipping through. The most recent access record was from just 2 days before the press conference. Submission notes. HY, Intelligent Priority Reconfiguration, Recon, Structure Module, Integration, HY, Han Yue. I opened the code comparison. The 2 pieces of code unfolded side by side. The overseas optimization algorithm. He talked about shares the exact same core structure as the abandoned module from 3 years ago. He didn't even left the English comments. I'd typoed back then completely unchanged. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. My phone rang. Zhou Ming. I connected. He was silent at first. I wasn't in a hurry either. After a long while, he said, "Debies, Chen Yan, you saw the hard drive?" "Yes, I saw it." He let out a sigh. "I'm sorry." I said nothing. Zhou Ming had been with me through the early days of the project. His child had just been born. His mortgage was pressing down on him, and his father was still in the hospital. I understood his silence. But understanding doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. He said, in a low voice, "Sadie." After Han Yue came back, he made us plug in the old modules, claiming it was a version his overseas team validated. The truth is, we all knew it was wrong. I asked, "Does Su Man know?" "She doesn't look at the code." Zhou Ming paused for a moment. "She only asks if the acceptance test can look better, if the roadshow presentation can be pitched." Ith more flair. I asked, "Who signed the confirmation form?" His voice dropped even lower. I did, he said hastily, "but I kept the old commit logs, along with the review notes from back then. The review comments when you scrap this module, I can give them to you." I stared at the screen. "Why give them now?" Zhou Ming gave a bitter smile. "After what happened at the hospital scar. He continued. "Chen Yan, the backup key can't fall into Han Yue's hands. You know that better than any of us." I said, "Of course I know, but they don't." Zhou Ming fell silent. I packed up all the old submission records, discarded review comments, and the latest access logs. Then I sent an email to Fang Zhe. The subject line had only 4 words: transfer of responsibility. Fang Zhe asked to meet me, not at the regulatory building. It was a very old tea house. He hadn't changed. White shirt, black jacket, a document bag by his side. His face expressionless, expression unchanged. After sitting down, he didn't exchange pleasantries. Confirmed that LNXN's illegal transfer of liability. I turned the laptop around. Right now, 3 things can be confirmed. First, on the day of the press conference, my permissions were downgraded. Han Yue took over the main console, and the filing was not completed. Second, Han Yue has reconnected the dynamic priority module from 3 years ago, which has caused anomalies in hospital scheduling. Third, inside Langsing is preparing to pin the old interface and the risks on me as an individual. Fang Ji flipped through the materials quickly. When he reached the management meeting minutes, he looked up at me. They've got more guts than I thought. I took a sip of tea. It was a bit bitter. He said, "You're more patient than I thought too." I didn't respond. Fang Ji closed the folder. Engineer Chen. When that title came out of his mouth, my fingers paused for a moment. My fingers paused. In 3 years, few at Langsing had addressed me like this. Addressed me. They call me Supervisor Chen. Old Chen. Night. Shift. Su Man. Su sometimes calls me Chen Yan, and sometimes doesn't bother. Just sends a message. Handle it. Take a look. Don't mess around. A bindy around. Fang Ji looked at me. Say DIT, you know, you still have one last confirmation, right? I said, I know. Delay it, and the risks will only grow. So I submitted the hospital records and module evidence. Fang Ji was silent for a few seconds. Are you still leaving leeway for Su Man? I watched the ripples in the teacup. Not for her. Then for whom? Follow the procedure. I said, Dale. She can misjudge me wrong. Han Yue can take the credit, and Capital can turn a blind eye. But at the final acceptance meeting, they must explain the chain of responsibility clearly in front of regulators, Capital, the media. Fang Jie looked at me for a moment. You want to wait for them to take that final step on their own? Yes. What if they don't? I said, then Cloudgate can still be saved. Fang Ji said nothing more. He took a confirmation document out of the file folder and slid it across to me. Tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon. The final review meeting is in the afternoon. The supervision team will be present. If you decide to withdraw the personal safety guarantee, confirm it on the spot. I didn't pick up right away. Just asked, is the emergency disconnection window still valid? Fang Ji said, it only works for the bound person. I nodded. Then, we'll do it tomorrow. That evening, Su Man came to my rented apartment. She stood at the door. Her makeup wasn't removed yet. There was a hint of weariness in her eyes. This was the first time she had personally me to see me since being suspended. Can we talk inside? I stepped aside. She walked into the room and immediately noticed the whiteboard against the wall. Her expression shifted slightly. The company is clearing out old items, not targeting you. I said, no need to explain. She pressed her lips together, as if she had been silenced. The room was very small. She stood by the table, utterly out of place. She used to come here often. Back then, we were broke. She'd leave her heels by the door, sit cross-legged on the carpet, and share instant noodles with me. Now, she just stood, as if ready to leave at any moment. Chen Yan, tomorrow's acceptance review is very important. I nodded. I know. She seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Han Yue just took over not long ago, and there are indeed some areas he is still unfamiliar with. Could you come back and help get through tomorrow? I looked at her. She continued. Once the acceptance review passes, Langsing's IPO will be secure. At that time, whatever you want, I can make it up to you. I asked, in what capacity? She was taken aback. I said, am I a suspended employee on suspension, or am I the party responsible for the old interface? Su Man's face turned slightly pale. Don't talk to me like that. Ndadi. Oh, then, how should I talk? Then, she was silent for a moment, then took a document from her bag and placed it on the table. The paper was perfectly smooth. The signature column already had a stye CK note attached. Chen Yan. I looked down. The content of the agreement was not long. I admit that in the early stages of the Cloudgate system, there were personally retained maintenance interfaces. The recent anomalies are related to my failure to hand them over in a timely manner. Langsing Technology will provide IL compensation after the acceptance inspection is completed. The compensation amount is left blank. Su Man pressed down on one corner of the agreement. It is just a formality. I looked up at her. Formality. Her voice lowered. Chen Yan, you understand the technology, and you understand the chain of responsibility. Right now, regulators, capital, and the media are all watching Langsing. Can't afford even a hint of negativity. Sign first. Go back tomorrow, and stabilize the system. After we go public, I will compensate you. She said it quickly. as if afraid that if she stopped, she wouldn't be able to continue. I asked, "Where is Han Yue?" Su-man avoided my gaze. "He is the front-facing lead. He can't have any issues at a time like this. So, it is okay if I do." She frowned. "Chen Yan, don't put it so harshly." I looked at the agreement and suddenly let out a small laugh. Su-man's face changed color. "Why are you laughing?" I picked up the agreement and read it from start to finish. Then, I took a photo. She immediately reached out her hand. "Chen Yan." I dodged. "NDD, what did he say? Save it to file. These are our internal communication materials. Why are you recording them?" I said. "I'm afraid that by tomorrow, you'll claim none of this ever happened." She froze. I placed the agreement back on the table. "Su-man, you didn't come to me tonight to save the project." I looked at her. "You came to make me take the fall for you. Or you." Her breath caught her breath. A few seconds later, her voice dropped. "I had no other choice." I said, "There is one." She looked up. "Pause the acceptance test. Restore original permissions. Permissions, seal Han Yue's access module, and redo the filing," she said, almost immediately. "Impossible." I nodded. Look, she wasn't without choices. Only, every time, she chose not the safe path, nor did not choose me either. She only chooses to go public. Su-man's eyes were slightly red. "Chen Yan, what exactly are you trying to do?" ASD. Langsing didn't get to where it is today easily. You know that. I just want to make it bigger. I just want to shut up all those who once looked down on me. She had said these things before. Back then, I used to soften. I'll say, "Fine, I'll help you." This time, I didn't. I asked her. She froze. I pointed at the whiteboard. "Don't forget, when once Langsing survives, who stood by you through the toughest times after it pulls through." Su-man's lips moved slightly. "I haven't forgotten." I looked at the agreement on the table. "You've forgotten completely." Tears fell from her eyes. "Chen Yan, Han Yue can only help me get to the stage. You're different." I asked. I said, "How am I different?" She couldn't say it. Because what she wanted to say was, Han Yue is suited to stand in the spotlight, and I am better off staying behind guarding her systems, bearing her risks and cleaning up all her dirty work. I pushed the agreement back. "It can't be signed." Su-man's face turned pale. "Chen Yan, this is not the time for you to be willful." I looked at her. "You didn't think I was being willful when you gave Y central control seat to Han Yue. You didn't think I was being willful when you used my old documents and signed his name to them. You didn't think I was being willful when you sent me to the standby seat on the spare bench. Now you want me to take the fall, and if I refuse, will be labeled as being willful." She clenched her fingers. "Do you hate me that much?" I was silent for a long time, then said, "Su-man, I've tried to understand you many times. Langsing doesn't have the money. You asked me to semi-license the core technology to the company. I understand. The regulators came knocking. You asked me to take full technical responsibility on all the technical responsibility. I understand. Doesn't like a silent techie. You asked me tools. You asked me to step back behind the curtains. I understand that too." She looked at me, her face slowly losing color bit by bit. I said, "Not this time." The final acceptance meeting was held at the Linjiang Government Cloud Center. Langsing had prepared it with great fanfare. The regulatory team, Capital Side, Media, Traffic Management Center, and Hospital Dispatch Center were all present. Cheng Xiang also came as well. His live stream title was very eye-catching. Langsing Cloud Gate Final Acceptance. Can Han Yue lead the team to legendary status? I didn't enter the main venue. Fang Ji's people arranged for me to be in the observation room, next to R. Through the one-way glass, I could see the venue. Su-man was sitting in the front row, white suit, clean makeup. Her expression was even colder than last night. Han Yue sat in the center of the technical section, still that same confident demeanor. In front of him lay the master control terminal, my former master control terminal. Lu Heng sat beside Su-man beside, speaking in a low voice. "Tode, it must be stable. Mingquan can't wait any longer." Su-man nodded. "There won't be any problems." Han Yue laughed as he took over the conversation. "Rest assured, President Lu, I've mostly cleaned up the old interfaces. What I'm showing you all today is the next generation Cloud Gate." I heard those words. My fingertip tapped lightly on the desk. Fang Ji stood beside me. Is he planning to activate real network integration? I stared at the screen. Gi. If he doesn't activate it, he can't prove himself. Does he know the risks? He only knows what looks good. The acceptance review begins. The first half went smoothly. Han Yue certainly knew how to talk. He described dynamic prioritization as an urban living organism, passed off the deprecated modules as intelligent adapted. He described manual inspections as an outdated path dependency. Several media representatives in the audience nodded repeatedly. Cheng Ziang 对着直播镜头小声说. Cheng Ziang said quietly into the live stream camera. Consultant Han really has a way with words. No wonder Langsing wanted to replace the face of their technology. I didn't move. On the backup screen, the city's emergency link stood ready for connection. Han Yue swiped to the last page. Next, We will demonstrate the Cloud Gate system's capability under condition. Fengzhi looked up. I also sat up straight. Han Yue pressed the confirmation. The data on the large screen began to scroll. Simulated traffic accident. Simulated hospital emergency. Simulated energy node. Energy fault. 3 tasks. Entered the city emergency pipeline simultaneously. The first 5 seconds were normal. The 6th second, traffic node priority, escalates. The 8th ambulance is redirected. The 10th energy node misjudges. The screen flashed red. Red alert, traffic priority conflict. Red alert, hospital emergency dispatch anomaly. Red alert, energy node linkage misjudgment. The venue fell silent in an instant. The smile on Han Yue's face froze. He lowered his head and typed quickly on the keyboard. The red alert did not disappear. Instead, another item was added. Urban emergency, link response instability. Meng Qinghe stood up from the representative seat. This matches the record of the ambulance misallocation from 2 days ago, he said. Lu Heng turned to look at Su Man. President Su. Su Man stared at the screen. Her expression finally changed. Han Yue's temple was starting to sweat, but he reacted quickly. He grabbed the microphone. NT data. Everyone, don't panic. This isn't a false alarm caused by residual old interfaces, left over from the old system, not a bug in not the new system's fault. He turned to the regulatory panel. Fei, Langsing's previous maintenance lead, responsible person, Chen Yan, privately retained maintenance interfaces, causing a conflict during the handover between the old and new systems. We have suspended him, pending investigation. Murmurs of discussion rippled through the conference hall. Cheng Xiang immediately turned the camera toward the corner of the venue. Chen Yan, the one who sat in the very back row at the last press conference last time. Han Yue grabbed onto it, like a lifeline. Yes, he was in charge of the old system for a long time, and some interfaces only he knows about. Our new team hasn't been at it long enough. We still have to sort through the legacy issues. Su Man did not argue. She just looked at the supervisor's seats. She was still gambling that I would, as always, save the system first. She's betting I won't dare to let things blow up in front of the regulators. She's betting I'll still cover all the risks for her. To her. Fengji turned on the microphone. Please have Chen Yan enter the venue. When I entered through the side door, everyone turned to look at me. Cheng Xiang's livestream camera was almost pressed in almost immediately. Han Yue froze for a moment when he saw me. Soon a cold smirk spread across his face. Team leader Fang, does an operations specialist who has been suspended have the right to participate in the final acceptance questioning? Fang Ji glanced at him. Whether he has the right or not, that is not for you to decide. I walked to the conference table. Su Man looked at me. There were warnings, panic in her eyes, and a trace of that familiar plea for help I'd known before. In the past, whenever she looked at me like this, I would take over the problem first. Not this time. I placed a USB drive on the table. The person from Fangji took it and plugged it into the venue's computer. The first document popped up. 发布会当天，全线调整记录. My master control permissions have been downgraded to observer status. Source of operation, authorized by CEO's office. Second, document, master control seat takeover record. Transferee, Han Yue. Filing status, incomplete. Third copy, hospital dispatch anomaly record. Anomaly report, Meng Qinghe. Spoke up on the spot. This record comes from the emergency dispatch center of Linjiang Hospital, and it is authentic and valid. After the anomaly occurred, the first person we contacted was Chen Yan, because for the past 3 years, he had been responsible for risk confirmation. Regarding the medical priority of the Cloud Gate system, the venue fell even more silent. The fourth document, Langsing internal bulletin and management meeting minutes. It's all written there in black and out. They want me to retroactively sign off on the liability statement of responsibility for the old interface. They're twisting the anomaly into a personal backdoor they kept on the side. Qin Lu stood in the corner, her face pale. Lu Heng's face also darkened. Han Yue stood up. Yes, this only proves that he had been reserving authority all along. He pointed at me. How else would he have the records? This only proves that he accessed the system without authorization. I looked at him. The source of the records is the regulatory backup interface. Han Yue froze. Where did you get the regulatory interface? Fang opened the folder. His voice not loud, yet it suppressed the entire venue. Chen Yan is one of the individual safety responsibility signatories in the supervision and filing of the Linjian G-Smart City Cloud Gate system. The venue went silent for a second. Then it completely erupted. Cheng Xiang, holding his phone, opened his mouth, but remained speechless for a long moment. The color slowly drained from Han Yue's face, slowly drained away. What signatory? Fang Ji continued. The core security architect for the first version of the Cloud Gate cloud system. During the final review of the Linjiang pilot, Chen Yan assumed the final layer of safety guarantee under his personal technical responsibility. At the same time, he is the sole holder of the emergency disconnection key. Su Man abruptly lifted her head. She looked at Fang Zhe, then turned her gaze toward me. At that moment, fear finally took hold of her at last. Han Yue forced a smile. Impossible. If he was that important, how come of the post? Why didn't anyone inside Langsing know? I said, "Fine." Because someone once said that the IPO story didn't need a silent tech guy. Su Man's lips parted. No words came out. I had the staff open the fifth file. Old version submission records. Obsolete module review comments. Han Yue's recent access records. On the large screen, 2 segments of code were displayed side by side. One was the dynamic priority module, or dynamic prioritization, that I had discarded 3 years ago. The other was what Han Yue called an optimized algorithm from overseas. The core structure was the same core structure. The variable names of the variables are the same. Even the misspelled English annotation was the same. Zhou Ming stood up. His voice was a little hoarse. I bear witness. Han Yue whipped his head toward him. Zhou Ming. Zhou Ming's face turned pale, but he remained standing. That module was scrapped by Engineer Cheech. And back when Engineer Chen, because it would misjudge the rigid priorities of medical and fire services. Han Yue demanded we reconnect it, and I signed off on the confirmation. He lowered his head. This is my fault. Han Yue snapped. You're lying. That algorithm belongs to my overseas team. Zhou Ming transmitted the old submission records to the regulatory panel. Fei Di, Dao Bai. Consultant Han, you didn't even fix the typos in the annotations. A sharp intake of breath could be heard from somewhere in the venue. Lu Heng looked at her. President, Su. His tone had completely changed. Ming Chuan invested in a controllable project, not a risky black box, guaranteed by an ex-boyfriend, or packaged by an old flame. That is an ugly thing to say. But no one person dared to refute. Han Yue wanted to explain further. The large screen suddenly displayed another red warning. Urban emergency link continues to continuous system instability. Please tag the bind person in charge to confirm the handling strategy. All eyes fell on me. Fang Ji looked at me. Day. Chen Yan, as the individual responsible for signed personal safety of safety liability, will you continue to bear the safety guarantee for Langsing Technology's current launch? This launch. The venue was very quiet. Su Man stood up. Chen Yan. Her voice was tense, was tight. This is not the time for personal vendettas. I looked at her. I know. Daidai. If the system is disconnected, Langsing's acceptance test will be over. I know that too. Her eyes turned red. Her eyes reddened. This was the first time she had shown such an expression in front of so many people. But I was no longer moved to pity. She said, in a low voice, help me this once, and we'll go back and talk things out properly. Han Yue quickly interjected. Chen Yan, deal with the system first. Don't bring personal grudges into a public project. You're still part of Langsing. I glanced at him. I'm no longer with Langsing. I took out my phone, logged into the Linjiang Smart City Safety Accountability Confirmation System. Fingerprint verification, dynamic code verification, chain of responsibility, confirmation. A final line of prompt displayed on the screen. Do you wish to withdraw the personal safety guarantee and activate the emergency disconnection protection? Su Man's face turned pale. Chen Yan, don't. I looked at her. The main control can be conceded. Authorship can be ceded. Credit can give away. I may even be reassigned to a backup seat. But public safety cannot be compromised. I pressed confirm. Personal safety guarantee withdrawn. Emergency disconnect initiated. Cloud gate system halted. The large screen at the center of the venue shifted from a red warning to a gray lock. In the end, only one line of text remained. City interface has been protectively disconnected. There was no explosion. There was no roar. There was no exaggerated sound of any kind. It was just so happened that the IPO story of Langsing's IPO, 3 years in the making, came to a halt. In that single second, the acceptance meeting was halted. The regulatory team immediately sealed Langsing's master control permissions, operation logs, and authorization records from before and after the press conference. Han Yue was taken to the adjacent room for questioning. He tried to explain at first, saying it wasn't plagiarism, just a similarity in technical approach. He said the old module was the result of his secondary optimization. Chen Yan was accused of having planned it all along, deliberately destroying Langsing during the acceptance review. No one listened, because the evidence was too complete, so complete that every word he said only tightened the noose around himself, just a little more. Meng Qinghe. Meng submitted the transcript had UB emitted the anomaly logs from the emergency dispatch center. Zhou Ming had submitted the review comments from the old version. Qin Lu was called in to explain the incident of the management meeting minutes being mistakenly sent out. When she came out and saw me, she lowered her head, her lips moving slightly. Chen Yan. I walked past her. She said no more. Lu Heng made 3 phone calls in the hallway. Half an hour later, Mingchuan Capital issued an internal notice. Suspend the investment progress of Langsing Technology before its IPO. Initiate project risk accountability. Cheng Xiang's live stream has already exploded. He stood in the corner, his expression a tangled mess. As I approached, he quickly tilted the camera down. Engineer Chen, I'm sorry, he said. At the last press conference, I really did just went along with the crowd. I didn't even stop. Apologies can sometimes be light, so light that they're not worth accepting. It was raining outside the government cloud center. I stood on the steps about to call a ride. Sue Man came chasing after him. She wasn't holding an umbrella. Rain soon soaked through her white coat. Chen Yan. I stopped. She stood 2 steps away from me. Gone was the CEO's aura from the conference hall. Without that habitual coldness of giving orders, I didn't know withdrawing the guarantee would be this serious. I looked at her. I warned you. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I thought you were just angry at me. You've always thought that. She froze. Rainwater dripped from the ends of her hair. After a long pause, she said, "Say B, I just wanted to make Lansing bigger. It hasn't been easy to get where I am today. Capital only cares about stories, about growth, about who can stand at the forefront. I need someone like Hanyue to help me hold the stage." I nodded. "So you had him take my spot at the main control station." Her face paled. "I thought it was here. I thought it was just a seat." I said, "Dadao 80, you think I'm just like them, that I'm just a person?" Su Man's tears fell. "Chen Yan, wait, 3 years. It has been 3 years. I cut her off. So I've understood you many times, 7 times. She looked at me, as if still waiting for a turnaround. But, not this time. I opened my umbrella. Not this time. She reached out to pull me. I took a step back. Her hand paused in midair. "Dede, you're really not coming back." I stared at the car headlights in the rain. "Su Man, it is not me that you've lost." A flicker of light flashed in her eyes, as if she thought I was about to say something. "NG tender." I continued, "It is not me you've lost. You're the one who personally tore down the safety foundation." That light went out. The car arrived. I opened the car door. Before getting into the car, I heard her calling my name through the rain. I didn't look back. As for what happened later, I learned it from the investigation report transcripts. Lansing Technology was placed under regulatory oversight for restructuring. The Cloud Gate project is being split for review. All authorization links before and after the press C conference were re-examined. Hanyue's so-called overseas project experience was also investigated. The result was ugly. He had been involved in several concept platforms a few times. He could talk, could package, could make an immature system sound like the city of the future during a roadshow, but he had never actually dealt with real risks in the city network faced. He was even less qualified to touch the emergency chain of Cloud Lock. Back in his early days, he had come across my abandoned security module. This time, he renamed it, reattaching it to the system. His name was added to the industry risk blacklist. After that, no tech company in Linjiang dared let him touch core security projects again. Su Man was removed from her position as CEO. Lansing's IPO plan was terminated. Mingquan Capital withdrew its investment. Lu Henglu called me later. His tone was completely different from the day of the press conference. "Engineer Chen, would you be interested in meeting up for a chat?" he said. "In the realm of urban safety, Capital still prefers to support those who truly understand the fundamentals." I said, "Not interested for now." He smiled. "No coercion." Zhou Ming left Lansing and joined the Rectificat on team. He treated me to a bowl of noodles. The noodle shop was very small. We sat by the window. He held his bowl, hardly touching his chopsticks, little to the chopsticks. Tandy ID. That day at the server room door, I didn't step up. I said, "I know. Do you blame me?" I picked up a mouthful of noodles. "I did." He gave a bitter smile. "And now, no time." He was taken aback. I said, "No time for a break. The system needs to be split and reviewed. There are a lot of old nodes to clean up." Zhou Ming lowered his head, his eyes slightly reddened, slightly red. Day also. "Engineer Chen, you're still the same." I didn't reply. I'm not without emotions. It's just that once certain things are over, there's no point in staying trapped there anymore. Some people step back away at the critical moment. Others step in to fill the gap. I may not forgive, but I can keep going. A month later, Binge took me to the Linjiang City Safety Command C. Enter. The new central control room was much larger than Lansing's. There was no backdrop for a press conference, no media lights, and no one sits in someone else's chair, holding coffee, a cup of coffee, telling stories, only rows of cold light screens. Transportation, healthcare, energy, and emergency broadcasting have been segmented into independent security zone. S. Beside every link, there stands a manual confirmation stations. Bang Fangja handed me a badge. Linjiang City Safety Center Special Advisor, Chen Yan. I took it. He pointed to the seat in the middle spot. "Your seat, your seat, your seat." I walked over. The chair was brand new. The desktop was also spotless. No old labels. The initial confirmation interface popped up on the screen. "Should access to the city safety monitoring be established?" I sat down. "Enter the confirmation code." As my fingers fell, I suddenly remembered the as linger, suddenly recalled the back thought row of remembered Lansing Central Control Center, the backup chair, hard and narrow. The screen was so small that only half a log could barely be seen in half. Back then, everyone thought that place was exactly where I belonged. Fang Ji asked, How does it feel? 7 Feel. I placed the new badge on the edge of the desk. It is fine. The cold light of the screen reflected off the back of my hand. This time, I didn't have to sit in the alternate seat.